Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Although this man over there at VandySports.com might disagree about the whole Everything School HQ, but we're all friends here on this week of rivalry week here in college football. It's Billy Derrick. Bailey, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I'm good, man. This is always my favorite week of the year because no matter how bad Vanderbilt has been in football, Vanderbilt people still get up for this. They still love, envisioning a potential win that could have the Tennessee fan base crumbling. And even though it doesn't happen often, and it's maybe not likely this weekend, that there's still that sort of euphoric thought of what would that be like? What would that be like for Nashville and for the Vanderbilt fan base? It's going to be tough, but I just love this week, the timing of it. I like that it's an early kick. It's gonna be chilly. It's gonna be in the, I think I saw low 40s. So I wonder. I know we'll get into it, but I wonder how the factors in the game, the pressure wise, affect Tennessee. But man, this is always my favorite week of the year. I love it.
To your point, this being a nooner is good because Tennessee has been playing night games forever, and thankfully we just got out of that against UTEP, and this one will also be a nooner. But waiting for this game until 8 o'clock, and then depending on how this game goes, some midnight situations there on Broadway could be really good or really bad, depending on how things go. So it's probably best that this game gets wrapped up by 3:30, 4 o'clock, whichever way it goes. But I don't know. I mean, it feels like from your vantage point, it's just kind of loose. Like I was watching Diego Pavia today on his presser, and I don't know. It just feels like Vandy is coming in like, hey, we've done this before. We obviously beat Alabama. You played Texas close. But on the flip side, like when I'm going through this, they're kind of beat up here down the stretch. Diego is kind of beat up down the stretch. You've lost 3 of 4. I mean, is it just schedule losses and it's just more of like who you've played, or are they kind of just banged up to a point where it's just they're just scraping by to get through this season now?
I think you just said it. They've really been banged up since the Alabama game. Diego Pavia has not been really close to 100%. I mean, I like right now, I'd probably say he's 65 to 70% heading into this game. But we saw it against Georgia State, where that was a game they lost. Pavia was not healthy and not particularly close to healthy, and this offense was not operating the way they did against Alabama, the way they did against Virginia Tech. Pavia is the offense. He's the straw that stirs the drink, and when he's not healthy, it's just a very different looking offense. He has to be, and he doesn't even have to be 100%. Like that Alabama game, I don't even know if he was 100%, because that was, it's not like that was week 1 or 2. Virginia Tech, you saw, when he's healthy and when this offense is clicking, they can beat anybody. I mean, they proved Alabama was the number 1 team in the country. Texas came in. Again, Pavia wasn't healthy. He got banged up in that game again. And Texas really brought pressure. I mean, that's one of the better defenses in the country. But Vanderbilt hung in there. They haven't lost a game all season by more than a score. Outside of South Carolina, which is the outlier here. South Carolina, I think, is one of the is one of the hotter teams, maybe the hottest team in the country. So I do throw that out a little bit, but I think you said it. Vanderbilt has been bruised up. They survived at Jordan-Hare against Auburn, but we've seen what Auburn is and isn't this year. I mean, I know they just beat Texas A&M, but Auburn is different than having a hot South Carolina team come into Nashville and play you. Or even, last week LSU, they were desperate. They had lost 3 in a row. So I think it's a combination of this team is so banged up right now, but do they have enough in the tank? Do they have one more perfectly executed game in them? The margins are still really small. This is a better Vanderbilt team than Tennessee fans have seen in the last really 4 or 5 years, I think. But is it enough still? And I think this Tennessee team is still built similar to the way they were last year. I wonder if this team has enough in the tank. Pavia's he's gotta be Pavia of Alabama, and I don't know that he can be that, but we'll see. We call him Mr. Magic Man for a reason.
Do you think we see a lot of Nate Johnson in this game, or do you think it's just, hey, this is the last game of the year, regardless of if he's at 60%, 65%, you just ride and die and let him leave it all out there?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about that. Nate Johnson was in there for a few snaps against LSU and actually had, like, after 2 snaps, he had 18 yards rushing. It was a couple of 9-yard pickups but when Nate Johnson's in, especially Tennessee's defense, they will know that Johnson's not going to throw. I can't remember
Yeah.
the last pass he threw was against Texas when he had to go in for Pavia. I wonder, especially with Pavia being around 70%, do they draw up a pass here or there for Nate Johnson? Especially if Pavia gets hit hard, he could be, he could be done. He hasn't been done in a single game. I mean, there's no telling what he's been playing on this year. So I do think there's a chance we see Nate Johnson, but with the margin being so small, I almost doubt it. Just because if you're going to win this game, or if you're going to lose this game, you're going to do it with or without Pavia. But you'd rather it be Pavia. You'd rather go down swinging with Pavia. But Johnson is explosive, and so I wonder if they have them both in there at the same time. They're going to get creative, Chase. I think that's the thing. That they're going to have to really get creative against this Tennessee defense and show some things they haven't shown in the last 3 matchups. This offense has been bad, and it's a lot of Pavia's health, but it's also the book is out on him. So I do wonder what else does Tim Beck, Vanderbilt's offense coordinator, have in his bag.
So I didn't realize like the Tim Beck versus Tim Banks matchup. Very close names.
Yeah.
Like we got Tim Beck versus Tim Banks here on offense and defense. It is interesting too because I was thinking about so Tennessee's 2 losses this season to Arkansas with Taylor Green. What he was doing was he had time. The middle of the field was open. Linebackers struggled big time for Tennessee in that game. Tennessee's biggest thing in their 2 losses, they have 1 pass play over 20 yards total. It was Dante Thornton had a 40-something yarder against Arkansas. But the way Georgia beat Tennessee 2 weeks ago was, Carson Beck dropped back pass 40 times and just diced the middle of the field up for the Dogs, and Tennessee just did not have an answer for that. But I just don't think Vanderbilt. It's just funny because I go back and forth on whether or not Vanderbilt is a team that is built to give Tennessee problems, and I think where a lot of folks look at is the time of possession, where if Vanderbilt gets the ball first here on Saturday. That's what Arkansas did. Arkansas got the ball first, and they had the ball for 8-9 minutes and just took the air out of the building, and they were like, we're playing time of possession. We're not giving Tennessee any chance. Tennessee barely had the ball in the first half. And I think that's probably the game plan because I don't think Vanderbilt can beat Tennessee the way Georgia did. But I think the margins of error, because Tennessee should have beaten Arkansas. That game, you play that 100 times.
Yeah.
That annoyed me. That whole ending, and then just 2 big runs to Braylon Russell. It is what it is. It was just a really dumb ending, Billy. And you look at Vanderbilt, and I'm just like, I don't know if the defense of old, when Tennessee was really still getting their footing defensively, they're really thin at linebacker in 2022 when South Carolina diced them up at the end of the year and dropping all those points. Tennessee's defense was nowhere near where it is right now. I think Vanderbilt is more built like a Kentucky-Tennessee game with Vandegrift, and that's not a shot on Pavia or anything else. It's just more of the offense to me feels like they are going to try and win time possession. They are going to play keep away, win on third downs, and not allow Tennessee to really get any momentum going because the rhythm has been, a problem for Tennessee's offense all year long. And my guess is it's probably out of rhythm on Saturday because we have a lot of data now to say that it's probably not going to be a consistent 4 quarters of elite offensive play for Tennessee. I don't know. It makes it dangerous, but I think to me that's the path for Vanderbilt. Is if we're looking up at time of possession and Vanderbilt's got 15 minutes of time possession, Tennessee's got 4. It's okay, well, this is the recipe.
Yeah, it's the only option. That's been their formula all season. From game 1 against Virginia Tech, they slowed it down. They just sort of suffocated Virginia Tech. Did the same thing to Alabama, but as Pavia slowly got less healthier and the book started to get out, I keep telling this to people. What these defensive ends are doing, they're crashing, and they are not even letting Vanderbilt get into what they want to do. They're not letting them. They're not even giving Pavia time to read. They're just. And if you have got to have those defensive ends. South Carolina brought pressure, and Pavia he's a magician at times, so he can escape some of those. But when this offense and this team is winning games, they have the football. They're possessing the football. They're converting 3rd and 4s, 3rd and 5s. When they're in 3rd and 10, 3rd and long, they're not winning games, and they have not been good on third downs in the last month or so. Really, for ever since that Alabama game, that's been a common theme. So I'm with you. I do think there's an avenue for Vanderbilt with their tight ends and with Tennessee's linebackers, but that you have to give Pavia enough time. Like even those seam routes to a tight end, you need a few seconds there. That's not as quick as a lot of people think. So I think with Tennessee's younger linebackers, whether it's Carter or Brooks or whoever, there's an avenue. But can Vanderbilt do enough of that? Like if they're bracketing Stowers, who's a really good tight end,
Yeah.
can your backup Cole Spence, help out? Can your receivers step up and make one-on-one plays? Vanderbilt's going to have to make a whole lot more plays than they have as of late. But also, you go back to the LSU game. LSU made the winning plays. They converted on third downs. They were 8 of 13 on third down. I think Vanderbilt's 2 of 10. The third down stat, Chase, that's huge every game for a lot of teams.
Yeah.
But Vanderbilt in particular, if you look at the wins, they have converted at a ridiculous rate on third downs. When they haven't, they've lost. So I and again, it's probably not that simple, but the turnover margin too. When they've been able to get turnovers, they've won as well, and they haven't been doing that as of late. So there's a very specific formula for this team, and the margin is tiny right now. Even especially now that you're playing a team as good as Tennessee. I don't think Tennessee is going to necessarily be aggressive. I don't think they have to be aggressive in this game. Now, there's going to be points where Nico's going to have to make a throw down the field, but this is a Dylan Sampson and Tennessee defense game. If those two things are clicking, Tennessee wins. But if Nico has a fumble, a strip sack, an interception, if Tennessee gives Vanderbilt anything, that's when I think Vanderbilt has a chance here. But Vanderbilt's not going to force the issue. They're gonna have to have Tennessee's help here. And so, the thing I keep going back to is that this is a better coach Vanderbilt team as well. Like Clarkley didn't necessarily have a great grasp or control of his team last year, but bringing in Jerry Kill and Tim Beck, like you mentioned, there's better leadership. The mentality is better. Is it enough? We'll see. But I think Tennessee's defense gave a little bit of a blueprint on how to attack them. But can Vanderbilt do that is my question.
Yeah, and I think too, one of the things that's going to be interesting and with Tennessee, so Boo Carter is the only true freshman starter for Tennessee. He is now returning punts. In the last 3 weeks, he's been returning punts, and he's D. Williams. And you remember the D. Williams punt return and just 2 years ago.
That was brutal. Yeah.
Yeah. That's in play. And that's when I'm looking at just ways that Tennessee can make this not nauseating for Tennessee fans for 3.5 hours on Saturday. I am concerned still, the receiver. So on Saturday against UTEP, Tennessee was shut out, 3 drives, no points, first quarter. UTEP's one of the 5 worst teams in FBS this year. They had their longest play was 25 yards to Mike Matthews through the air. Longest run was, I think, 27 from DSamp. And the explosive plays still just aren't there. And I don't think, even though what we've seen for the last 3 years is a lot of explosive plays from Tennessee and Vanderbilt. So I guess my thing is that I think what could be an avenue, because I've said for weeks, and I said it on a panel before the Georgia game 2 weeks ago, was look, if Dante Thornton doesn't have 2 receptions for 80 yards, everyone's looking at, is Nico going to play? Is Dante going to play? How many snaps is Dante going to get? Because he's been your only consistent deep threat, and this offense just has such a limitation on it when you're not utilizing those wide splits and those guys are not winning at least a couple times one-on-one downfield. You're always going to be able to run the ball. I love DSamp, but Tennessee is going to be able to run the ball with DSamp. They were able to run the ball with Jalen Wright. They were able to run the ball with Jabari Small. They were able to that's just part of having wide splits and not a lot of guys in the box. I think that's just part of the deal. DSamp's just unbelievably durable, carrying hard loads, touchdown every game this year. So when people are like, "Oh, Dylan Sampson's got a big game, he's got to do this," I'm like, "Yeah, Dylan Sampson's had some big Dylan Sampson. I think will be fine. I think it's more of, does Boo Carter, to me, flip the field? Because he was responsible for 2 touchdowns against UTEP. Not returning, but he got you first and goal, 38-yard return. Those are the kind of things, to me, that I will be most tuned into. So from the special teams vantage point for you, Billy, is that in play? Have they cleaned that up? Is that something that you're worried about? Because Boo Carter is going to he's going to put a lot of pressure on this Vanderbilt punting game, and I think that actually might be the difference to me.
I think that's the X factor. I think Boot Carter is that good. He's that could be the case against, a Georgia or a Texas. So I think he is that good. Vanderbilt's punt coverage unit is better, but against Luther Burden, he had a couple of big returns, and that impacted the game. And punt returns, that's the X factor in a lot of these games. And Boo Carter could be the difference, especially if this is a rock fight fourth quarter close one score game. A long Boo Carter punt return could win it. And so I think, but again, I go back. Vanderbilt's punt coverage team has been better, but I also think Vanderbilt's special teams as a whole can match Tennessee finally. That has been, you mentioned the D. Williams punt return, and he's been great in kickoff returns too in Vanderbilt matchups in the past. That killed Vanderbilt. That's you can't have, especially in the last few meetings, Tennessee's offense is good enough to beat you anyway. When you have a 75-yard punt return from D. Williams, it's kind of the nail in the coffin type feeling for Vanderbilt. So that has been an emphasis all season. They have a really good punter in Jesse Mirko. They're really strategic with what they do there. I'm sure they'll punt it out of bounds. They'll angle it, but he's been really good at pinning punt returners deep. And man, that's a key. I know special teams is always a key, but in this matchup, Vanderbilt's going to win this game. I think I say defense and special teams, Pavia is going to have to make plays, but it's hard for me to sit back here and say Pavia is going to have a ridiculous, Heisman type performance. I think Vanderbilt's defense has to force a couple of turnovers, and their special teams, you need a big play on special teams. And it could also be flipped on a negative Boot Carter play. With him being a young player, does he muff? Does he pick one up when he probably shouldn't have? So as athletic as he is, I wonder if he, potentially ends up making a big mistake as well. So that he could really flip this game. And, you wonder with a young player that does he start to feel the pressure? But Vanderbilt's kicker is really good. Knoxville Catholic kid, Brock Taylor, who's hit multiple 50-plus yarders as well. So I think the special teams, and I don't say this every game. I think there's a lot of things in football where we sit back with, you could say this for every game, but I think in this style of game, it could be won on special teams. And I think Heupel knows that. I think he really, really knows that. So I think you make a good point about Boot Carter, and absolutely, Vanderbilt has to be keyed on him.
And then if you feel like, I wonder too, because so Tennessee's offense, and last year I think this final score kind of surprised me. You talked about there were a lot of issues, and we learned I think a lot of fans were just looking at Joe Milton for the majority of last year, and I just looked at it as there's more at play there, and you're seeing this year that back-to-back just down years for the offense. It's a lot more complicated with what's going on with the Tennessee offense over the last 2 years, but they still dropped 48 on Vanderbilt, and it was at home. But 48, 56, 45 for Tennessee in this matchup under Heupel. In your estimation, based on what you've seen, is Heupel's offense a particularly bad matchup for Clark Lee? Or do you think it's just been personnel? Because we've all just penciled in, this is going to be close and this could be a rock fight. But there is part of me that's are we overthinking this just a bit, and that Heupel does have something that he just really likes to exploit about this Clark Lee defense?
I've thought about that a lot. And, look, Clark Lee, he's a Nashville guy. He grew up here. He went to Vanderbilt. There's nothing more than he hates than seeing Tennessee just wipe the floor with his team. And he said that it has just wore at him. But I'm with you. I think that's why I think this game is so big, obviously, for Tennessee. But if Vanderbilt fans come to this game and they see another 42-14 win for Tennessee, I don't think that's likely, but that's been the track record, like you said. And if that happens, I think that all of a sudden there's a little bit more heat on Clark, because that's your in-state rival. It's a type of game you could go 3-9, but if you beat Tennessee, fans are happy in Nashville. So I'm with you here. I do think it'll be different, and I say that because they did bring in some portal players on defense, and Clark Lee has taken over the defense. Nick Howell last year, I think he was one of the worst defensive coordinators in the country. I don't think that was a very good hire from Vanderbilt. Statistically, they were awful. They're so much better statistically this year. They're better on third downs, but they're not on the field as much either. That was a huge problem when facing Tennessee. Vanderbilt's offense could not carry any of the load. And so that put way too much pressure on the defense. And when there's pressure on the defense against a Tennessee Josh Heupel offense, it's not a good thing. So I think it will be different, Chase, but I have wondered, and I think we're going to learn on Saturday, but I've wondered, has Josh Heupel got his number? There's certain, it's like the Tennessee Kentucky thing. Josh Heupel owns Kentucky, and there's certain coaches that have that ability, no matter what personnel they have. Tennessee teams have been slightly different, but you've got an even better defensive front this year if you're Tennessee, and you've got a great running game with Dylan Sampson and even Peyton Lewis as well. I think a good difference again is Nico. I think, is Nico ready for that 40-degree weather at 11 a.m. at First Bank Stadium? That's the other thing. I think players get it's a weird, interesting feel playing at Vanderbilt. Like, this is a smaller stadium. It feels like, we're on the road, but we have more fans, and it kind of plays with players' minds. And I've heard about that before. So I wonder about that with Nico. I know Tennessee's veteran led around him, but I do think it'll be different. I think it will be a lower scoring game. I think it could be one, maybe two possessions. But there is that thought in the back of my mind: does Heupel just have his number? Yeah. And that happens in football. But again, I do think it'll be different. And CJ Taylor actually talked about that. He said, we've got better players, we've got better coaches, and the mentality is different. But if it's not, then there's some heat coming Clarkley's way, Chase. I think you make a good point about that.
I mean, there's heat coming either way. Like, this is one of those, I don't know how you're sleeping much if you're Clarkley or Josh Heupel.
Oh, my gosh. I told somebody the other day that I think this could be the most, because of the pressure and the heat, this could be one of the more fiery Vanderbilt Tennessee football games in a long time. I mean, I think, last year we had the fight, but that Vanderbilt team was really bad. Yeah. And, Tennessee they just wanted to get out of there healthy. But I do go back to maybe 2016, when Vandy knocked Tennessee out of the Sugar Bowl contention. But, this is it for these programs. I mean, this is it for Tennessee, like you said, off air. This would be just cataclysmic, in terms of a Tennessee loss. But for Vanderbilt, Vandy fans would be talking about this for the rest of their lives. Yeah. And both programs know that. And so I think there's going to be some jawing. There's going to be some pushing and shoving. Vanderbilt talks. They like to talk, and they don't have much room here in the last month or two to talk. But I think they've got that edge to them. They've got that mentality. I think Tennessee will see that early on. That this Vanderbilt team will be ready to play. But skill-wise, can Tennessee find those one-on-one matchups that can win the game? I think is going to be key.
Well, we're bringing Tony Vitello, so that should help. He'll be on the sideline, so I'm excited for that one. You need the juice. Like, we need Tony on the sideline, which is great. And I know Vanderbilt fans, big Tony Vitello fans. So that'll be good. But I was listening to Sports Talk here locally this morning, and he was on, and it was just like, I think he said that he's planning to be there on Saturday. So on the field, and Tony's in there. He gets animated, man. Difference. It's a huge thing. I feel better about Tony Vitello in Nashville, in a high stakes game. Like,
Tony Vitello, I mean, he lives rent free in a lot of Vanderbilt people's heads.
Yes,
but I've gained a lot of respect for him. I really have, because and people like to over dramatize that he took the program for Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's still a two-time national champion baseball program, and that's a really, really strong rivalry.
And it's also better with these two being rivals and hated and playing in big games. Like, that's the best scenario. Is like, I actually love, because there's not enough rivalries, and it's like, oh, there's some real animosity. Like, this feels like two big heavyweight fights whenever they play.
Yeah, and people say, well, Tennessee fans like it because they always win. Well, I mean, it's not the case, especially in baseball, basketball. There was an upset. I do think I've heard from plenty of Tennessee people. They like when Vanderbilt is better, and it's better for everybody. It's better for the state, And so I think it's fun when it's a meaningful game. Last year was dull, and the last 3-4 years just haven't been exciting matchups. This is really fun. 11 a.m. kick, a couple of days after Thanksgiving. Get your coffee in you and watch it.
I don't know. 2 years ago, I took it personally. with Kirk Herbstreit picking Vanderbilt to win and get to bowl eligibility. And there was a lot of like, is Tennessee's not going to get up off the mat after going down to South Carolina and everything. I don't know. I was pretty animated after that one, where I was like, oh wow, this is the kind of smoke where I'm like, y'all, you don't know what you woken up here. Like Tennessee, just go ahead and lock in. I was never more confident about a Tennessee win than Tennessee beating Vanderbilt in 2022 after the kind of conversation and the kind of loss that they had in South Carolina, where I was absolutely not. This is outrageous. Tennessee's winning this football game, and they're actually going to win very, very handedly. This is wild. People have lost their minds.
And then they did. And walking into that game, as soon as Milton dropped the bomb to was it Squirrel White?
I think it was Squirrel.
Early, 80-yard. I said it's over. It's over. Tennessee fans erupted, and I hope it's different. I think it will be different, but it's also there's motivation on both sides, like you said, but obviously way more on the Tennessee side.
Well, Diego's got juice, man. I think there's going to be not like a fight like last year or anything, but I think there's going to be some back and forth. There's going to be something. Because there's just too much pressure in the game, like there's just too much animosity and there's too much, which is good. This is what makes football fun, and which team handles the pressure better. But there's obviously a lot more on Tennessee in this week, but still, Clark Lee can ride if Vanderbilt pulls this off. Like Clark Lee can ride this for years.
Statue.
Like it's like we knocked Tennessee out of the playoff. Like that's because this is a de facto playoff game for Tennessee.
Yeah. And they know that. Like Pavia talked about that. He said, man, that there would be nothing better for us to knock Tennessee out of the playoff. But, it's also like there's a lot of Tennessee natives on obviously both sides. Whether there's Vanderbilt players that weren't recruited by Tennessee, or there's Tennessee players that, just don't like Vanderbilt. It's not, there's two very different schools, different fan bases. But, man, it's fun to see the hate flow whenever they play.
We need Gabe Judy-Lawley out there just to lead Tennessee out. Like, what's up? Played for both sides.
This is the Jawan Jennings game. Jawan Jennings famously hated Vanderbilt. So
it's true.
But I think that was because like Vanderbilt, Derek Mason, when he was there, didn't recruit him. I think Jawan wanted to go to Vanderbilt and originally, thought that could be the school for him. And that was in the I think the Butch Jones days. So different
all-time great high school quarterback too, Jawan Jennings.
Yeah. So there's some hatred.
Yeah, for sure. Billy, what can the good folks check out from you over at the George Plaster Show and VandySports.com this week?
Yeah, so in Nashville, this is our last show this week on the Plaster Show. We'll be talking Vandy, Tennessee, talking a lot of college football. That's Monday through Friday, 3 to 5 Central, so 4 to 6 Eastern on 94.9 The Fan. You can also stream it online, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. So last show this week, but then we actually have a podcast out right now on VandySports.com with our Roundtable podcast previewing this matchup. And then I'll actually have a pregame show later this week. So for Vandy, Tennessee, I think it'll be released Friday. So looking forward to it. And it's the best time of the year, Chase.
Love it. Billy, keep up the great work, sir. And we will have to check back in again very soon.
Appreciate it.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.